around 60 to 70% of the world's population will get corona. We have to flatten the curve. It will take probably 2 years to get rid of the virus. These are statements that are often said in the news right now. But why exactly will 2/3 be infected? How many of us will die? And what does flattening the curve really mean? With these questions, I welcome you to the square root of science. If one of us got the virus in his body, then if we just wait long enough, everybody should be infected, right? Well, not that fast. In this video, we will explore how diseases are modeled in a scientific manner and see what that actually means for the current coronavirus. In epidemic modeling, one way to describe an ongoing disease is the so-called SEIR model. For this purpose, we have to assign all people to different categories, depending on their current status. The first one will be called susceptible, which basically means that they haven't got the virus yet, but may get it at some point. So at the beginning, everybody is in this group. To lay the foundation for the virus, at least one person needs to be affected by the virus. This group will be called infected. At some point, this person might have contact with one of the healthy persons, which then gets the virus as well. As long as the symptoms didn't break out, we will call this person exposed. After a certain period, which is called the incubation time, this person will become sick and is then called infected as well. Now, as time goes on, more and more people become exposed and afterwards infected. But luckily, at least in the ideal case, our immune system will defeat the disease at some point and we get healthy again. This group will be called recovered and all persons in here won't get the virus a second time. Summing up all those groups will give us N, the total number of population. Now here comes the interesting part, since we are interested in the amount of persons moving from one group to the next one in one day. For the probability that one single person gets the virus, we simply multiply the average amount of persons to which you have contact in one day with the probability that any randomly chosen person being already infected by the virus. And in order to get the total amount of persons, we simply multiply this probability by the total number of persons in this group. From here, it's just a matter of time. On average, a person will be in the exposed group for the incubation period. Therefore, the probability to get to the next category on one specific day is 1 over the incubation period. We then again multiply by the number of all exposed people. The same holds for the last step. One person will stay here for the period of the infection. Therefore, the probability to become healthy is 1 over the infectious period. And in order to get the rate of persons, we multiply again by the people being in this group. Now the amount of contact persons each day will be called beta, and the probability that one random person is infected is exactly I over N. Moreover, the inverse incubation period is mostly called alpha, and the inverse infectious period is called gamma. Using these expressions, we are able to determine equations for the rates from one category to the next one. And these rates mathematically are basically just time derivatives. Now all people being exposed to the virus disappear in S and move on to E. In the same manner, we add the expressions from E to I and from I to R. If we sum up all equations, we can see that the total amount of people stays the same over time, since we didn't include any kind of deaths. Now this is what is actually called a coupled system of differential equations. In order to include that people, we can go for the simplest approach. We simply divide our old group R into 2 new groups, now called R for recovered and D for dead. To get expressions for those new groups, we multiply the old value by the case fatality rate and by 1 minus the case fatality rate. This CFR value is basically the technical term for the lethality of the virus. The only challenge now is to get reliable values for these 4 variables. I'll cite you all papers I used in order to get those parameters in the description. If one then solves these differential equations, we can plot the amount of people in each category over time. In the beginning, the number of unaffected persons decreases, as exponentially more and more people get exposed, infected, and recovered. Now this is exactly the status where most of our countries are currently in at the moment. However, this exponential growth won't go on forever, as the number of new infections crucially depends on the amount of persons in S, which in fact shrinks. Therefore, at some point, the number of new infections will flatten out, and that's exactly the point we are all looking for. From now on, the number of infectious people goes backwards, and that's exactly the main reason why not everybody will get the virus, but only around 2/3 of the population. Or in simpler words, to find the last few susceptible persons is pretty hard for the virus, since people also recover at some point and are not infectious anymore. As a last point, we separate our recovered people into real recovered people and dead persons, as I explained before. Actually, the curve, which everyone is talking about, is the orange one, the number of currently infected people. To get a bit more into detail, we will plot it on a different scale. As you can see, at around 40 days from now on, we would have an enormous amount of sick people. If you now plot the capability of our healthcare system, you will see that it will be massively bursted. The method of choice now is to reduce the amount of contact persons. This in fact draws out the disease, but it also shrinks the maximum amount of infected persons at the same time. At the moment, this is the only way not to overload all our hospitals. Exactly this reducing of beta is what is called social distancing and is motivated by hashtags as flatten the curve or stay at home. There is one last thing which is permanently present in the news right now, which is called the growth factor. Technically, it's defined as beta over gamma, and hence as the number of persons which you have sufficient contact to every day times the number of days of your infection. This of course results in the amount of infected person during your whole infection period. For the current coronavirus, this value is around 3 at the moment, and of course can be reduced by reducing beta as well. Now thank you so much for coming here, and of course make sure to follow me on all my social media platforms.